Okay, this is a review video on evaluating functions. So when we talk about evaluating functions, in your head, you might be thinking plugging it in. Well, let's talk specifically about what plugging it in actually means. Okay, so what I've got us started with here is a function f of x in red actually graphed onto a coordinate plane. And what we're going to do is evaluate the function or figure out what these values in black are actually going to be, and just talk about what the questions are actually asking with the notation that's here. So this first question, f parentheses 1, what you might hear that read as is f of 1. And f of 1, literally what they're asking you, and this is probably worth writing down, what is the y value of the function when the x value is 1? What is the y value of the function when the x value is 1? So what we can do, and I'm going to use a color that's easy to see, I can go over to 1 on my x-axis, and then I just find where my function is, and in this case it's down, and I could go and I can connect to that point. So what's the y value when x is 1? It's going to be negative 2. That's where my graph is right there. Okay. Now the next question asks me a little bit different direction. It says f of x equals negative 3. So it's saying for what x value is the y value negative 3. So you're looking at this red graph and you're finding where are all the locations where the y value or the point on the graph has a y value of negative 3. Well, negative 3 right here, and the only point with a y value of negative 3 is right there. So they're literally asking, well, what's the x value of that point, where the x value would be negative 2. So the x value is negative 2 here. Or as you might often see this written, x equals negative 2 is probably the easiest way to write that. So the first question they ask is what's the y value? Because f of 1, you already know what the x value of 1 is. And they want to know what the y value is when the x value is 1. The second question is what's the x value when the y value is negative 3? All right, and then we've got this third question that says find f of x equals 2. So this is kind of like the second question. What are the x value, what points have a y value of 2? What are their x values? Well, if you take a look up here, 2 is, oh, go backwards on that. 2 is right here. So you've got a whole slew of points right along this horizontal piece right here. And every single one of those points, every single speck of red is another point. Every single one of those points, and I know we've got some key points marked here, but every single speck of red is another point. So I mean, we could spend all day just making, point after point after point after point after point. Every single speck of red is another point. But every single one of those points has a y value of 2. So there's way more points than just one that has a y value of 2. There's so many that we couldn't even list them because we're even talking about, fractions in here, like, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, and just keep on down the line there. So we would have to write what's called an interval. And so for all of the points that have a y value of 2, you would start with an x value of 2, and you would go all the way to an x value of 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's every single point from 2 to 6 has a y value of 2. And that's how we would write that. So you could have one point that has that x or y value that they're looking for, or you could have a whole interval because you have an infinite number of points that meet those qualifications. So this is a way for us to evaluate a function using a graph. Here, we could talk about evaluating a function using the equation that they give us. So we're going to start with two different functions, f of x and g of x. They're two different functions. That's why I did them in different colors and they have different names, f and g. F of x is 3x squared minus 1, so that means for whatever x value that you're given, you would plug it in there for x, and the result would be the y value of f. G, same thing. Substitute in for x, what you get back would be the y value of that. So when we're talking about finding f of negative 2, we're literally saying what's the y value when f is negative 2. So that means I'm going to take f of x, and everywhere I see an x, I'm going to replace it with negative 2. That's where that idea of plug it in comes from. So here we go. So f of negative 2 is equal to 3 times negative 2 quantity squared minus 1. And I'm just going to simplify that. Remember, order of operations. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So another thing that you'll hear me say a lot this class is going to be work your way from the inside out. So doing our order of operations, negative 2 squared is positive 4. Okay, and then order of operations, I do multiplication before I do subtraction. 3 times 4 is 12, minus 1 is 11. So what's the y value when x is negative 2 in the function f? It's 11. So that's how you would get your answer for that. Let's take a look at g of 4. That means everywhere I see an x, I'm going to put a 4 for that function g. All right, so g of 4 is going to be 1/2, and instead of x, I put a 4 plus 3. Order of operations says a multiplication before addition. 1/2 times 4 is 2, plus 3 is 5. So what's the y value when x is 4 in the g function? That would be 5. So just highlighting what we figured out here, and here we can use the x value that they gave us and plug it into our function. To make sure you're paying attention to which function you're plugging it into, not everything goes into the same function. Then we get this interesting, and I'm even going to do a little bit of erasing just to give us a little bit more focus here on our last example I want to talk about with you. And it says find f plus g of 3. All this is me writing this. I could write this same exact thing like this. F of 3 plus g of 3. Those two things mean the exact same thing. So I'm going to figure out what f of 3 is, and I'm going to figure out what g of 3 is completely separate, and then I'll add their results together. So completely separate, f of 3 looks like 3 times 3 squared minus 1. Find that result. 3 times 9 minus 1. 27 minus 1 is 26. So then when I replace f of 3 with 26 and g of 3 with 4.5, I'll add those two results together and I get 30.5 as my f plus g of 3.